The streets of Manhattan were alive with their usual energy, honking taxis, hurried pedestrians, and the occasional street performer adding music to the chaos. Barron Trump, now 18 and carving his own path in life, had spent the morning attending a small charity event downtown. The experience had left him deep in thought as he strolled through the city. Dressed simply in a navy jacket and jeans, his hands tucked into his pockets to shield against the crisp autumn air. Barron often used these walks to clear his head, reflecting on the privileges he had and the responsibilities they brought. His family name carried weight, something he could never escape, but also something he was learning to use for good. Lost in thought, he almost missed the faint voice that broke through the city noise. "Excuse me, can you spare $1? The voice was small, hesitant, yet it carried a weight that made Barron stop in his tracks. He turned toward the source and saw a boy, no older than 10, sitting on the sidewalk with a small cardboard sign next to him. The sign read, "Hungry and alone, please help." The boy's name was Chris. His clothes were worn and too thin for the weather, his face pale with exhaustion. His brown eyes had a dullness to them, as if life had drained him of hope. Next, to him was a small, crumpled backpack, his only possession. For a moment, Barron stood frozen, the noise of the city fading into the background. He had seen homelessness before, but something about the boy struck him deeply. This wasn't just poverty. It was abandonment, a life teetering on the edge. Barron approached, crouching down to meet Chris at eye level. "What's your name?" he asked softly. The boy hesitated, as if unsure whether to trust him. "Chris," he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. Barron nodded. "Chris, where's your family? Are you out here by yourself?" Chris lowered his head, gripping the straps of his backpack tightly. "My dad, he's gone, and my mom." His voice cracked. "She left me here. She said she'd come back, but she didn't." Barron's chest tightened. He sat down on the cold sidewalk beside Chris, ignoring the stares of passers-by. "How long have you been out here?" Barron asked. Chris shrugged. "A few days. I don't know. I get hungry and I don't know what else to do." Barron's mind raced. He had spent years living in comfort, shielded from the harsher realities of life. But now, face to face, with a boy who had lost everything, he felt an overwhelming sense of responsibility. "You're not alone anymore, Chris," Barron said firmly. "We'll figure this out together." Chris looked up at him, confused. "Why are you helping me? Nobody else stops." Barron smiled gently. "Because sometimes we just need someone to listen. And because you deserve better than this." Barron reached into his wallet and handed Chris a $20 bill, but he knew money wasn't enough. He had resources, connections, and the ability to make a real difference, and he was determined to use them. As Chris clutched the bill tightly, Barron pulled out his phone. "Chris, I'm going to make a few calls. There's someone I know who can help us find your mom and make sure you're safe in the meantime." Chris hesitated. "But my mom doesn't care. She doesn't want me." Barron placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I don't believe that, Chris. Sometimes people lose their way, but it doesn't mean they stop loving you. Let me try, okay?" Chris nodded slowly, tears welling in his eyes. For the first time in days, he felt a glimmer of hope. As Barron made his calls, he couldn't shake the thought that this encounter was more than chance. He wasn't just helping Chris find his family. He was giving the boy a chance to believe in kindness again. Barron Trump spent the next hour with Chris, sitting beside him on the cold sidewalk while waiting for help to arrive. Passers-by occasionally glanced their way, but no one stopped. The noise of the city faded into the background as Barron focused entirely on the boy's story. Chris opened up hesitantly, his voice shaking as he revealed the painful truth of his life. His father had died in a car accident 2 years ago, leaving his mother, Jessica, to care for him alone. But after losing her husband, Jessica spiraled into addiction, numbing her pain with substances that eventually consumed her life. "She wasn't always like that," Chris said, clutching his tattered backpack. "She used to take care of me, tell me bedtime stories, and make pancakes every Sunday. But after Dad, she stopped smiling. Then one day, she started yelling, more, staying out all night. And then she just left me here." Barron's heart ached as he listened. It was a story of loss and brokenness, but he could see in Chris's eyes that the boy still loved his mother, despite everything. A black SUV pulled up to the curb, and a woman stepped out, Barron's family contact, someone he trusted to assist in delicate situations. She introduced herself to Chris with a kind smile, kneeling to his level. "We're going to help you, Chris," she said softly. "We'll make sure you're safe." Chris looked at Barron, fear flashing in his eyes. "You're not leaving, are you?" Barron crouched beside him, placing a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "I'm staying. We're going to figure this out together." As they drove to a temporary shelter, Barron quietly made more phone calls. His determination grew stronger with every word. He wasn't going to stop at helping Chris. He was going to find Jessica and try to reunite their family. Hours later, as Chris rested in the shelter for the first time in days, Barron received an update. Jessica had been found in a rundown motel on the edge of the city. She was reluctant to meet, distrustful of anyone claiming to help. "She doesn't believe anyone cares," the social worker told Barron over the phone. Barron thought for a moment before replying, "I need to talk to her myself." The next morning, Barron arrived at the motel with the social worker. The air was heavy with the smell of cigarettes and damp carpet as they knocked on the door. It creaked open slightly, revealing a woman with hollow eyes and unkempt hair. Jessica looked much older than her age, her face lined with the toll of grief and addiction. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice defensive. "I'm here because of Chris," Barron said gently. "He's safe now, and he wants to see you." Jessica froze, her hand gripping the edge of the door. Her expression shifted from suspicion to something unreadable. "Chris, you found him? He's been waiting for you," Barron continued. "But before you see him, I want to help you get better, for him and for yourself." Jessica shook her head, her eyes filling with tears. "I can't. I've already failed him. He's better off without me." Barron stepped closer, his voice steady but filled with compassion. "You're his mother. He loves you, and he's been waiting for you to come back. It's not too late. Let us help you." The tension in the room was palpable as Jessica looked at Barron, torn between fear and hope. Finally, she nodded, wiping her face with the sleeve of her sweater. "I don't know how to fix this," she whispered. "You don't have to do it alone," Barron replied. "We'll take it one step at a time." Jessica agreed to enter a rehabilitation program, and over the next few weeks, Barron visited her progress regularly. Chris was hesitant at first, unsure if he could trust his mother again, but with Barron's encouragement, he began to believe in the possibility of a new beginning. One day, after weeks of therapy and hard work, Jessica stood in front of Chris, tears streaming down her face as she hugged him tightly. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I'll never leave you again." Chris buried his face in her shoulder, his small frame shaking with sobs. "I missed you, Mom." Barron watched from a distance, a sense of quiet satisfaction washing over him. He had promised Chris he wouldn't stop until his family was whole again, and he had kept that promise. But this isn't the end. Stay tuned to see how this family's journey continues and the incredible impact of Barron's efforts to bring them back together. Don't miss the final part. It will inspire you in ways you won't expect. Weeks turned into months, and the transformation in Jessica was nothing short of remarkable. With the support of a rehabilitation program and regular therapy, she was reclaiming parts of herself that she thought were lost forever. Her days were no longer consumed by the darkness of addiction. Instead, they were filled with the hope of rebuilding her life and reconnecting with Chris. Barron remained a steady presence throughout her recovery. He visited the rehab center often, checking in on Jessica's progress and ensuring she had everything she needed. He also spent time with Chris, helping the boy adjust to a sense of stability he hadn't known in years. Chris was hesitant at first, unsure if he could trust his mother to truly change, but with Barron's guidance, he began to open his heart. One afternoon, Barron brought Chris to the rehab center for a supervised visit with Jessica. It was the first time they had seen each other since that fateful day on the streets. As they entered the small meeting room, Jessica stood nervously, her hands trembling as she wiped them on her jeans. "Hi, Chris," she said softly, her voice breaking. Chris hesitated in the doorway, clutching Barron's hand. He looked at his mother, noticing the changes in her appearance. She looked healthier, her eyes brighter, her posture more confident. But the wounds of the past hadn't fully healed, and he wasn't sure if he could trust the person standing in front of him. Barron knelt beside Chris, speaking gently. "It's okay to take your time. She's here because she loves you, and she's been working hard to be the mom you deserve." Chris took a small step forward, then another, until he was standing directly in front of Jessica. She knelt to his height, tears streaming down her face as she whispered, "I'm so sorry, Chris. I love you more than anything, and I'll spend the rest of my life making this right." For a moment, there was silence. Then, Chris reached out and hugged her tightly, his small arms wrapping around her neck. Jessica sobbed openly, holding him as if she would never let go. Barron watched from the corner of the room, his chest tightening with emotion. This was the moment he had hoped for, a mother and son finding their way back to each other. But he knew the journey wasn't over yet. Jessica spent several more weeks in the program, gaining strength and building a foundation for her new life. Meanwhile, Barron worked quietly behind the scenes to ensure that she and Chris would have a safe and stable home once she was ready to leave. One day, as Jessica neared the end of her treatment, Barron brought her and Chris to visit a small apartment he had arranged for them. It wasn't extravagant, but it was clean, warm, and filled with everything they would need to start fresh. "This is for you," Barron said, handing Jessica the keys. "A place to call home." Jessica stared at the keys in disbelief, her eyes filling with tears. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to," Barron replied with a gentle smile. "Just keep moving forward. That's all the thanks I need." As they stepped into the apartment, Chris ran excitedly from room to room, his laughter echoing through the space. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. Jessica looked around, her heart swelling with gratitude. She turned to Barron, her voice trembling as she said, "You gave us more than a home. You gave us hope." Barron nodded, his expression calm but full of emotion. "Everyone deserves a second chance, Jessica. You just had to believe in yourself." As the days passed, Jessica and Chris settled into their new home, gradually creating a life that felt stable and safe. Chris returned to school, where he quickly made friends and began to thrive academically. For the first time, he didn't have to worry about where his next meal would come from or whether he'd have a place to sleep at night. Jessica, too, embraced her fresh start. She found part-time work at a local community center, assisting other families who were struggling, much like she had been. It became her way of giving back, a reminder that she could turn her pain into purpose. Every morning, she walked Chris to school, holding his hand tightly as if to remind herself of the second chance she had been given. Barron kept a respectful distance, but stayed connected. He made sure Jessica had access to resources and continued to check in with Chris, often surprising him with books or small gifts to encourage his growth. He watched from afar as the bond between mother and son grew stronger each day. Months later, Jessica and Chris invited Barron over for dinner to thank him for everything he had done. It was a modest meal, but the warmth and gratitude in the room were palpable. "You didn't just save us," Jessica said as they sat around the table. "You gave me the courage to believe I could be better for Chris. I'll never forget that." Chris chimed in, his voice shy but sincere. "Thank you, Barron, for everything." Barron smiled, his heart full as he looked at the family they had become. "I didn't do this alone. You two did the hard work. I just gave you a little push." As the evening wound down, Barron stood to leave. Jessica hugged him tightly, and Chris clung to his side for a moment before letting go. "Promise you'll visit again?" Chris asked. "Of course," Barron replied with a grin. "This isn't goodbye. It's just the beginning." As Barron walked out into the cool night air, he felt a profound sense of fulfillment. This wasn't just a story of helping a mother and son. It was a reminder of the power of compassion and the ripple effect one act of kindness could have. Jessica and Chris's story quickly became an inspiration in their community. Local organizations reached out to Jessica to share her journey, while Chris's teachers marveled at his resilience and newfound confidence. Barron, however, remained humble about his role. When asked about it in an interview months later, he simply said, "Sometimes, all it takes is believing in someone when they've stopped believing in themselves. Everyone deserves that chance." The story resonated far and wide, touching the hearts of those who heard it. It served as a testament to the fact that, even in the darkest of moments, hope and redemption are always possible. If this story moved you, don't keep it to yourself. Share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness and second chances can change lives. Like, comment, and subscribe for more inspiring stories like this one. Together, we can spread hope, one story at a time.